Hello, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Portland Voter Forum for November 4th, 2025. This is a special election for the Multnomah County ballot measure 26-260, which is the Portland's Park Levy. I am Linda Mather of the League of Women Voters of Portland, and I will be moderating this forum. The League is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to making democracy work. We believe democracy works best when voters are informed about issues and engaged in their communities. So we're presenting this forum and podcast to give you a chance to learn more about this proposal. The county voters pamphlet on page 30 describes this measure as one which would, quote, maintain safe parks, nature, affordable recreation through a 5-year levy. Now, a levy is a method of financing of projects that can be used by local agencies. If passed, this levy would provide funds for recreational and nature-related services and programs in the Portland parks. I can get more information on levy and related information at our website, which is lwvpdx.org. Only voters who live within the city limits of Portland, which is about 81% of the voters in the county, will be able to vote on this measure. We're grateful for the support of the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, the Weiss Foundation, the members of the League of Women Voters of Portland, and our media partner, Metro East Community Media. We've invited representatives from groups supporting and opposing this levy to present and discuss their group's points of view so that you can have some information. Representing the proponents of the levy is Tony Morse of the Portlanders for Parks. Representing those opposed to the levy is Portland resident Bob Weinstein. Welcome to you both, and thank you for participating. What we've agreed to do is that each of you will give an opening statement of 2 minutes in length. Then you will have questions which have been prepared ahead of time, although you haven't seen them. And you will have 60 seconds to answer those questions. And then you will have a 2-minute closing. We've asked you to adhere to the allotted times, and you have agreed to do so. So thank you. Let's see if we can make this work. All right, we're ready to get started, gentlemen? All right, so Tony, you will give the first opening statement. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Linda. Portlanders love their parks. They're where we gather, play, and connect. But years of underfunding have left the system stretched thin. The levy voters passed in 2020 stopped deep cuts and kept community centers and playgrounds open. Now, with the higher costs for labor, utilities, and maintenance, that same levy rate just doesn't go as far. The proposed new levy includes a modest rate increase, carefully designed to keep our parks clean, safe, and open, not to expand programs, but to preserve the basics. It focuses on core operations and frontline staff, the people who maintain fields, run community centers, and deliver recreation programs. Importantly, this proposed levy also strengthens accountability and long-term planning. The Oversight Committee will report directly to City Council. The Parks Bureau must spell out how much of its operations are levy funded each year, and it's required to set measurable performance goals so the public can track progress. City Council also directed the Bureau to develop a long-range financial plan by 2028 and to work with the legislature to clarify how system development charges can fund capital maintenance, which is a key step toward addressing our $800 million maintenance backlog. This levy won't fix everything, but we can't afford to let our parks close or deteriorate further while those long-term solutions take shape. Passing this levy is a responsible, transparent way to protect the parks Portlanders rely on and to build a sustainable future for the system we all love. Thank you.
And thank you. And Bob, your opening statement, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank the League for this opportunity to get some good information out to voters. Um, we all do love our parks, but loving them means demanding accountability and sustainable planning, not endless tax hikes like the 75% increase in this ballot measure that fail to solve underlying problems. Because they are regressive, rising taxes and fees hit working families and small businesses and seniors the hardest, while failing to secure parks for the long term. I want to put this levy proposal in context a little bit. I wrote an op-ed in July for the Oregonian regarding the fact that Portlanders, working families, seniors, small businesses are being squeezed by the rising costs at every level of government. City taxes keep rising, city fees keep rising, property taxes for many owners have increased over the past 5 years. We just had an increase in water, sewer, and storm water rates of 6.34%, plus another nearly 3% for those who pay with credit or debit cards. We had 25% parking rate increases that hurt local businesses, tripled ride shares, 5% hikes to permitting costs. The county raised 33% for restaurant inspection fees, a move that the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association said was a, quote, major financial blow that could jeopardize the fragile recovery of our local restaurants and lodging establishments. The problem is not only that Portland has one of the highest combined tax rates in the country, but also that many taxpayers feel like their tax dollars aren't improving public services. In other words, they're not getting their money's worth. I think I'll close with that and say that yet another tax hike will adversely affect working families and small businesses and seniors who are struggling to make ends meet.
Thank you. I will tell you that the questions I will ask you are in most cases going to give you more of a chance to elaborate on what you've said in your opening. So let's start kind of as a basic. Tony, is this measure necessary? Why or why not?
Thank you. Yes, Measure 26260 is necessary. Portlanders rely on parks every day, from community centers to ball fields, and this levy keeps them open and safe. I want to point out that costs have risen sharply since 2020. Labor, utilities, and supplies, things that no bureau can control. This levy maintains the current service levels. It is not expansion. And City Council already reduced the proposed rate from $1.60 to $1.37 after finding efficiencies. Without this levy, we'd face 25% service cuts, which means closing pools, cutting recreation centers, and maintenance jobs. And I want to point out that Portlanders make very clear consistently that they expect a current level of service that Parks is already delivering, and they do so through demonstrating that through park usage, through their public testimony at public hearings, and also it shows up in polling data.
Okay.
We can't afford to let parks deteriorate.
Thank you, Tony. And
while
Bob.
we plan long-term reforms.
Okay.
I assume I'll get equal time overage. Is this measure necessary? No, the measure is not necessary in its current form. While parks clearly needs sustainable funding, the levy simply does not address the fundamental problems that created the current crisis. Over the past 5 years under the 2020 levy, park staffing ballooned from 565 to 836 positions, 48% increase, while the maintenance backlog grew from 450 million to 600 million. The proposed levy dedicates only 2 million annually, only 3 cents of the $1.40 of the 75% tax increase is going to major maintenance, while 84 million goes to continue to fund operational spending patterns that proved unsustainable. What's necessary is a financially sound plan that prioritizes or at least balances maintenance and operations, and certainly controls operational costs. The City Council has until May 2026 to propose a better balanced levy, one at $1, with the extra 20 cents dedicated to capital maintenance, would generate 13 million, 7 times more than the current proposal. Thank you.
And thank you. And Bob, you're going to start on this one. 2 days ago, the Portland Auditor's Office released a 24-page performance audit of the fiscal management of the parks. What conclusions reported there do you find significant as to how they might affect a voter's decision on this proposed levy?
Yeah, great question. The audit report released by the city auditor contains several damning findings that voters should consider carefully. First, there's an infrastructure crisis. As of September 2024, 86% of park assets, including playgrounds, paths, and restrooms, are in poor or very bad condition, with a maintenance backlog growing to, according to the auditor, now it's between $550 and $800 million. The audit warns that some assets will fail regardless of how much funding parks raises in the next 10 years because the backlog is so large. The auditor found there's systematic management failure. The Bureau simply has not taken a systematic approach to finding and implementing cost savings, revenue generating, or service reduction strategies, and as a result had not given decision makers the critical information needed to make the park system fiscally sustainable over the long term. Building without maintenance plans, political pressure over planning, and no evidence of cost savings.
And I know you're going to keep going. So,
right. So I'll stop.
You.
Okay.
Right.
Thank
Will
you.
be another chance shortly.
Okay.
And Tony, what about the audit report?
This audit highlights long-standing financial challenges that predates Portland's new government structure. This proposed parks levy was crafted by City Council to address those concerns with stronger accountability, direct council oversight, and a requirement for a long-term financial plan. Supporting the levy means protecting parks while making the system more transparent and sustainable. The audit reinforces why this new levy is needed and different, and the audit covered past decisions under the old form of government. Since then, Council has required annual public reports on levy spending and staffing, a community oversight body that reports directly to Council, a long-term financial plan and asset management by reform by 2028, and those are direct responses to the issues the audit raised. Supporting the levy ensures funding and accountability to move forward together. And remember, voting no won't address the maintenance backlog. It will close parks.
Okay, and here's another one that's so nice to answer in 60 seconds. And Tony, you're going to get us started. Do you agree or disagree with the audit's report conclusion that the Parks Department, quote, had not taken a systematic approach to identifying, evaluating, implementing cost-saving, revenue-generating, or service reduction strategies? If you agree with that conclusion, how, if at all, do the provisions of the proposed levy address those concerns?
Thank you, Linda. Well, I would point out that recent cuts have already been made. In the current year's budget, the Parks Bureau eliminated or reduced administrative and overhead costs and found about $1.5 to $2 million in savings. These cuts included consolidating back office support and non-field positions while preserving direct park operations, maintenance, and recreation jobs. With regard to future streamlining, we can, through the city's new centralized services model, which will merge and downsize duplicative functions across bureaus such as communications, HR, and procurement. These changes are part of a citywide effort to spend less on administrative and more on frontline work, a structural reform, not a one-time cut. The new levy also requires performance metrics, regular reporting to council, and a partnership manager to bring in new revenue. and commits council to a long-range financial plan for the Bureau. In addition, the city is already working on a long-term asset management strategy due to council by next September, and part of this council's focus on taking care of what we have and addressing gaps like those identified in the audit.
Thank you. And Bob, do you want me to reread the sentence?
Yeah, if you don't mind, that would be great.
Sure. Where am I? Do you agree or disagree with the report conclusion that the Parks Department, quote, had not taken a systematic approach to identifying, evaluating, implementing cost-saving, revenue-generating, or service reduction strategies? If you do agree with that conclusion, how, if at all, do the provisions of the proposed levy address those concerns?
Yeah, thank you. I strongly agree with the conclusion. It's consistent with over a decade of the city budget office recommendations that parks largely ignored. Since 2013, the CBO has repeatedly warned parks to define core services, adopt sustainable service levels, and develop long-term financial plans. Despite these warnings, parks increased staffing by nearly 50%, while maintenance backlogs grew by $150 million. The proposed levy provisions fail to address these concerns, allocating only $2 million annually to capital maintenance while dedicating $84 million to operations, essentially locks in the unsustainable spending patterns that created the crisis. There's no requirement for parks to implement the systematic reforms the audit identifies as missing. The levy does not mandate development of prioritized maintenance plans, sustainable service level definitions, or cost control measures. A responsible levy would condition funding on implementing specific reforms, requiring a prioritized maintenance plan, capping operational spending growth, and dedicating meaningful resources to capital needs.
Okay, we're going to continue with the capital. This is important. Bob, what is your assessment of the current parks levy oversight of the spent funds?
The oversight of the 2020 levy funds appears to have been inadequate, allowing parks to drift further from financial sustainability rather than using the levy as intended as a bridge to develop permanent and sustainable solutions to funding parks. Instead, one, staffing exploded, but service levels did not improve proportionally. The levy was supposed to, quote, prevent ongoing reductions to park services and recreation programs, but parks used it to fund massive expansion rather than stabilization. As I've said several times, maintenance was deferred, not accelerated or largely addressed. And there was no accountability for reform. The city budget office explicitly stated in 2021 that the levy should provide, quote, time and opportunity for the Bureau to thoughtfully and equitably restructure its services and address funding gaps, including a major maintenance replacement fund. 5 years later, that has not occurred.
Okay, thank you. And Tony, your assessment of the current situation?
Well, thank you, Linda. Well, I would point to the assessment of the independent auditor who released a report in 2024 that said that the 2020 levy has been a resounding success. The 2020 levy promised two things. Our parks and recreation services would be protected, and tax dollars would be spent responsibly with oversight and transparency. And per this audit from 2024, the record is clear. Both promises have been kept. That independent 2024 performance audit confirmed that levy funds were used in compliance with voter-approved commitments and that levy dollars were clearly tracked using strong financial systems. Auditors found no misuse of funds and made no recommendations for improvement, showing that Portland Parks and Recreation is managing these dollars with integrity. Each year, the Parks Levy Oversight Committee, a 5-member volunteer group that reviews program implementation, advises on transparency and communication strategies, reports to City Council, and they are have been resoundingly approving of the 2020 audit.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, levy, not audit.
You were editing there very well to get into the time limit, so thank you. Now we're going to keep you going. Other than the dollar amount of the levy per $1,000 of assessed value, how do the provisions of the proposed levy vary from the current levy? And it's yours, Tony.
And I'm a first.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. It adds a new accountability and transparency measures. It creates a dedicated position to expand partnerships and outside revenue, requires measurable outcomes approved by City Council, and includes some capital maintenance funds, about $2 million per year. It directs city staff to pursue state changes to SDC funds so that they can be used for major maintenance. And in short, it's more focused, more disciplined, and built for long-term planning.
And Bob, the differences?
The most significant difference appears to be the explicit, although frankly quite minimal, allocation of $2 million annually to major capital maintenance to address a $600 million and growing maintenance backlog. At that rate, not including inflation, it would take 300 years of this levy to fix the backlog. The levies both share one fundamental flaw. They primarily fund operations rather than addressing the capital maintenance crisis. Both appear to lack meaningful accountability mechanisms, requiring parks to implement sustainable service levels, cost controls, or systematic planning reforms that the city budget has recommended since 2013. A final change is that the Oversight Committee will report to the City Council rather than to the professional park staff. Some advocates feel that's a great idea. From my perspective, it puts oversight right in the middle of political decision-making, which the auditor said affected parks when different elected officials propose construction of parks without allocating funds to maintain them.
You are watching or listening to a voter forum produced by the League of Women Voters of Portland on ballot measure 26-260, the Portland Parks Levy, which is on the November 4th ballot. And now we'll go to some more questions. And Bob, you're going to take this one first. To what extent does the City Council have the authority to modify either the projects or the allocated dollar amounts in this proposed levy if it passes?
Okay, the levy is structured so of the $1.40 per thousand tax rate and the 75% tax increase proposal, $1.37 is allocated for park operations and only 3 cents for capital maintenance. If the levy passes, the council would be bound by those provisions and would have limited authority to make changes between the allocations for operations and capital maintenance without returning to voters. In other words, the council would be restricted from redirecting funds from operations to capital maintenance, even if circumstances demanded it. Given Parks' history of spending decisions that prioritized expansion unsustainably over critical maintenance needs, it seems unlikely that the allocation between operations and maintenance would become more balanced, even if the council had the authority to do so, which it does not.
And Tony?
Council can make adjustments only within the levy's legal purpose, which is operations and maintenance. All expenditures remain subject to public oversight and annual reporting. And because the Oversight Committee now reports directly to Council, any deviation would be public and transparent. In that regard, there's far less room for shell games under the older levy. And also, it's important to recognize that the measure before voters right now was the end result of a very involved process that involved folks from the community, different constituencies weighing in on what needs and priorities ought to be. And if council sought to deviate from those same groups would be able to voice their concerns.
Thank you. Let's see, where are we? So, Tony, you're going to continue with what are the consequences to the city parks if this measure does not pass?
This levy provides 1/3 of Parks' operating budget. So if it fails, the Bureau faces immediate 25% cuts, which means fewer clean parks, closed pools, lost youth, and senior programs. That means layoffs, shuttered centers, and declining safety and less upkeep. Portlanders value their parks, and we can't risk losing them while we wait for another ballot measure months or further from now while things get worse. It's critical to pass this levy this election cycle so we can continue to deliver the level of service, programs, and operations that Portlanders expect and deserve.
And Bob, what are the consequences if it does not pass?
But one of the consequences is that Parks would need to operate within its budget allocation and existing resources. The department would finally have to make difficult decisions about core services and sustainable service levels that the city budget office has recommended since 2013 and Parks has avoided for over a decade. As I said earlier, the council can refer a better design levy to voters in May 2026. The timeline allows for developing a measure that meaningfully addresses the $600 million maintenance backlog while controlling operational spending rather than perpetuating unsustainable patterns that would result in tax hikes every 5 years. Cutting staff in parks is a policy choice. The council has other options. I don't have the time to tell the whole story, but a 2011 article in Willamette quoted former Commissioner Mike Lindberg expressing alarm that city communication staff had grown from 22 in 2023 to 28 in 2011. He said, that's a pretty big price tag. It's just continually grown. If I was mayor, I'd take a hard look. We have 85
Okay,
communication staff now, and there has
thank
still
you.
been no hard look. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Last question, gentlemen. So, Bob, you're going to get us started. How might the concept of compression affect the actual amount paid by the individual taxpayer under this proposed levy?
Well, I'm not an expert in compression and Measure 50 and so on, but my understanding is that compression is a property tax effect that limits the amount of revenue that can be collected from property tax measures on a property by property basis. And with the passage of a new local option levy like this, other existing local option levies are the first line items on a tax bill to be subject to compression. It's my understanding that the 2020 levy resulted in some compression on the children's levy. The City Council approved a resolution to hold the children's levy harmless, and in FY22 and FY23, Parks transferred $380,000 and $350,000 to the children's levy. I don't know what the city's currently forecasting, but I would not be surprised to see a proportionally greater impact on the children's levy and a similar process to hold the children's levy harmless.
Thank you. And Tony, compression?
Thanks, Linda. Well, compression limits total taxes on properties already near their cap. So what that means is some owners pay less than $1.40 per $1,000 in assessed value, and that's especially true in East Portland, while others will pay the full rate. It doesn't increase anyone's taxes beyond the stated rate, it just reduces collections for some properties. The city's rate is higher partly to offset those compression losses and keep park services stable citywide. And I would add that passing this levy will ensure that the city council doesn't have to face very difficult decisions to make up the revenue deficit, potentially looking at core services like public safety that could be cut.
Okay. We turn now to the closing section. And Tony, you have 2 minutes for your closing.
Thank you, Linda. Well, I want to say thank you to the League for the opportunity to be here today and talk about this crucial levy on our ballots. If you haven't received your ballot already, it ought to be arriving any day now. Portland parks are one of our greatest shared assets, and right now they're at a crossroads. The levy renewal before voters isn't about growing government or adding new programs. It's about protecting what we already have: safe, clean parks and community centers that are open to everyone. This measure is lean, emphasizes accountability, and is focused on core services. It keeps the lights on, supports the frontline staff who care about our parks, and gives the city time to plan for a sustainable long-term future. That includes a financial roadmap and policy changes City Council has already directed. The alternative is unacceptable, letting facilities close and allowing decades of investment to deteriorate while we wait for a perfect solution. Portland deserves better than that. More than 150 trusted local organizations and community leaders, from Portland Metro Chamber to environmental advocates like the Oregon League of Conservation Voters to labor unions like SEIU and Laborers Local 483, have endorsed the Portland Parks Levy because it's a responsible bridge to stability, one that maintains public trust and keeps our park system strong while the city develops lasting financial tools for the future. Ballots are due soon, so please remember they must be returned or postmarked by Tuesday, November 4th. You can drop yours at any official drop site or learn more about the measure at portlandersforparks.org. Together, we can keep Portland parks open, welcoming, and well cared for now and for the next generation. Please vote yes on the Portland Parks Levy. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bob, your closing, please.
Yeah, thank you. City's mismanagement for many years created this sad situation. Portlanders already face sky-high taxes and fees. The 2020 park levy failed to address the maintenance crisis and fueled unsustainable spending, even according to the city's own budget office. The 2025 park levy proposal is a 75% tax hike that continues the same failed approach with only token funding for real repairs. We love our parks, but a basic rule of budgeting is simple. Don't build what you can't maintain. City Hall has ignored that rule while asking taxpayers for ever bigger blank checks. Multiple spending-related data suggests Portland parks are not underfunded, as the Trust for Public Lands and other reputable sources score Portland with the maximum number of points in the spending category, 318 per person versus 192 average for the big 100 cities of the United States. What Portland lacks is fiscal discipline. The proposed tax will hurt working families, small businesses, and senior citizens. Seniors, the average Social Security payment in Oregon is $1,931. 30% of Social Security recipients in Oregon rely on that for 90% or more of their income. 1/3 of Oregonians say they could not cover a $400 emergency. Yet another tax hike is in the works here that will affect working families and small businesses. Voting no is the only way to demand accountability, a real maintenance plan, and a levy that provides sustainable stewardship and that actually saves our parks.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your participation, and particularly thank you for your very informed, clear responses to the questions. Some of this material is very detailed, and you made it very clear, so I thank you for that. Watchers and listeners, please share this forum recording with your family, friends, neighbors, anybody you can think of, so that we can all be more informed. We need to be informed. This recording and podcast and other information about this and other races on the ballot are expected to be available online by Saturday, October 18th at the League website, lwvpdx.org, and vote411.org, and they'll be available through Election Day, which is Tuesday, November 4th. Ballots were mailed to all registered voters starting October 15th. As with all elections, it is mail-in. Ballots are due by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 4th, and the postmarks do count. So make sure your ballot is postmarked but no postage is required by Tuesday, November 4th. Or if you have to or you want to, find a Dropbox location near you by checking www.vote411.org or checking your voter's pamphlet. If you do wish to vote in person, check your voter's pamphlet for information on how to do that. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit membership organization. Hope this forum was meaningful for you. We welcome you to join or contribute at lwvpdx.org. Thank you for watching or listening. And please be an informed voter. Remember, your vote does count. Thank you.